Good morning. I'm Vicki Wynn in for Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, onslaught breaking overnight. Another key port city under attack in Ukraine. This morning, fires, explosions, and widespread destruction in Odesa as Russian forces strike by land and sea. This as the U.S. pledges more military support for Ukraine. We have team coverage with the latest. Manhunt over, a dramatic end to a nationwide search more than a week after it began. This morning, a capital murder suspect is back behind bars, and the corrections officer accused of helping him escape is dead.
We got a dangerous man off the street today. He is never going to see the light of day again. And, that's a good thing for not just our community, but that's a good thing for this country.
More on the clues that led to a chase and a crash hundreds of miles from the escape. Man with a plan. Today, President Biden set to share a new strategy to fight record inflation. What we know about the president's proposal to lower costs and how it could impact your bottom line. And just checking in, we've got your mental health news and trends, including a new social media campaign designed to help you scroll your way to higher self-esteem, plus tips for college students coping with depression and anxiety from the pandemic. That is our mental health check-in, which we do every week, which is always such a nice little reprieve to talk about these types of things.
It is an important segment. That'll be interesting because so much of the scrolling that we see is doom scrolling. So I want to see how this can help us.
That's exactly what it is. And it really does have an effect on your self-esteem. So we'll talk through that, especially for young people.
Yeah.
Begin this morning, though, with the war in Ukraine, where the major port city of Odesa has come under a new Russian attack.
Authorities say one person was killed and 5 were injured when missiles struck a shopping center and a warehouse. The attack comes as President Zelensky warns of a global food crisis if Russia continues to block Ukraine's main ports, which export agricultural products around the world. In Washington, President Biden signed into law the World War II-era Lend-Lease Act. It's aimed at streamlining military aid to Ukraine. Speaking yesterday, the president also said the U.S. is in this for the long haul.
Every day, Ukrainians pay with their lives, and they fight along the atrocities that the Russians are engaging in are just beyond the pale. And the cost of the fight is not cheap, but caving to aggression is even more costly. That's why we're staying in this.
We will hear from the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute, Jameel Jaffer, in just a few moments. But before that, let's go to NBC News senior national correspondent Jay Gray, who joins us live from Lviv. Jay, good morning to you. Let's start off in Odesa. What can you tell us about this latest attack and the situation there right now?
Yeah, Vicki, the situation dire there right now. They continue to be pummeled from the air in Odesa. Over the last 48 hours, it's really stepped up dramatically there. Pretty clear that Russian troops are trying to take control of the entire coastline there. And you talked about the blockade of grain being shipped. That's going to become much more of a problem as we move forward here, with Russia really trying to dig in that Odesa area. We had a report from troops on the ground, Ukrainian fighters, that at least 7 of the missiles used during attacks in Odesa were actually Soviet-era missiles. So to them, that's an indication that perhaps the Russians are running a bit low on ammunition. They see that as a good sign and say they'll continue to maintain the course there and resist as tough as possible. And so far, doing a very good job of maintaining their territory there.
Jay, we're also watching Mariupol this morning. There was a small Victory Day ceremony held in that city yesterday, despite the ongoing siege at the steel plant there. What's the latest on those trapped inside? How many are still there?
Well, we're getting reports today that at least 100 civilians are still in the Mariupol area. Now, we don't know that they're inside that steel mill. Over the weekend, Ukrainian officials reported that all of the women, children, and elderly were pulled from that steel mill during the 4th trip by UN teams to try and extract them. They said that they had everyone there, that all that was left was the men from that area and the fighters who were staying and maintaining their resistance there. That has really been a hot point over the last couple of weeks of fighting between Russian troops on the ground and the Ukrainians there, and continues to be. But now we are getting reports of 100 civilians that may still be in that area.
Jay, I want to move away from the battlefield for a moment, and we understand you have been meeting with Ukrainian artisans in Lviv who are making their mark on this war in a very different way. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Vicki, pretty amazing to see a group of artists who craft things out of leather and make purses and wallets and things like passport holders. Now turning their attention and their machines toward making equipment for those on the front lines here in Ukraine, making holsters, making grenade sheaths as well, tourniquets for soldiers, and testing it in their facility before it makes its way to the battlefield. It's become a big effort from this group. 50% of what they're doing now is dedicated towards getting supplies to Ukraine fighters on the front lines.
Jay, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
For more on Ukraine, let's bring in Jameel Jaffer. He's the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute and former associate White House counsel to President George W. Bush. Thanks for being here with us this morning. So let's start with the revival of the Lend-Lease Act that Vicki mentioned a little bit ago. This famously allowed the U.S. to quickly send arms to its allies in Europe during World War II, but it also drew the U.S. into that conflict. Of course, that's been a concern here this whole time. Are you concerned about the U.S. becoming too entangled in Ukraine? I mean, beyond sending in American troops, which we have said we will not do, are there any other red lines before getting to that point that are too far when it comes to U.S. support for Ukraine that could ratchet this up with Russia?
Well, you know, Savannah, during the World War II, the U.S. had sort of this pretense of neutrality, and Lend-Lease sort of changed the dynamic at that point. The reality is that from the beginning, we've supported the Ukrainians in this conflict. We've poured a ton of weapons and humanitarian aid into that conflict. This is just another methodology that actually just lightens up the requirements on the president to do some things he was already doing, providing direct support and lending and leasing material to the Ukrainians and other allies in this fight. So in a lot of ways, this legislation simply lightens up requirements. It doesn't fundamentally change the dynamic going forward, which has been now for a long time for the nearly 3 months of this war. The U.S. provided significant supplies, military equipment, and humanitarian aid to the Ukrainians directly.
Now, on Capitol Hill, the House is expected to vote today on a new package of military aid and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. President Biden says actually that without this money, shipments to Ukraine would have to stop in approximately 9 days. Just how dependent is Ukraine on U.S. weapons and money at this point? And do we have a sense of whether it's enough?
Well, look, there's no doubt that the weapons and equipment provided by the United States and our allies have been critical to this fight. The Javelin missiles they're using against tanks, the Stinger missiles they're using against aircraft, these new drones that we've now equipped them with that are going to be game changers in the fight. The Switchblade drones, the new Phoenix Ghost drones. So these are very important parts of the thing. Obviously, the Ukrainians have been doing a lot on their own capabilities, their own willingness to take this fight to the Russians have been important in this fight. But there's no question that without the support of the U.S. and our allies, the Ukrainians are going to face a dramatically uphill battle against the Russians, who do have a larger, more capable force than they put on the battlefield yet thus far.
Jameel Jaffer, thank you so much. We appreciate your time this morning.
We turn now to breaking news from overnight. A tense multi-state manhunt is over for a murder suspect and the Alabama corrections officer accused of helping him escape. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock is in Evansville, Indiana, where it all came to a violent end.
Savannah and Vicki, good morning. With authorities closing in, the duo decided to make one last run for it. The U.S. Marshal Service using some good old-fashioned police work, tracking them down after a nearly 11-day-long manhunt. Casey White, the convicted felon, now behind bars here, and Vicki White, his accomplice and former corrections officer, is dead.
In pursuit. The suspects from Alabama.
The U.S. Marshal Service says following a roughly 10-minute pursuit of Vicki and Casey White, this smashed Cadillac, their final getaway car, was rammed by task force members, with Casey driving and Vicki in the passenger seat.
The Marshal task force officers intercepted them, actually collided with them to try to end the pursuit.
Video showing police cars rushing into the area where this all ended and appears to show authorities detaining a suspect. While the marshals say they didn't hear any gunshots, it soon became clear Vicki had fired a single bullet into her head.
We could hear her on the line saying she had her finger on the trigger.
The decorated corrections officer later dying of her injuries. The U.S. Marshal Service also telling NBC News Casey got out of the car, surrendered, and said, quote, "Please help my wife. She just shot herself in the head, and I didn't do it." Authorities say there is no indication the two were married. The stunning sequence coming hours after investigators tracked a pickup truck Casey bought a week ago in Tennessee and ultimately ditched in Evansville at a local car wash.
I noticed a black Ford truck sticking out of the end of the bay, and my first thought, this could be that guy from Alabama, because it's got Tennessee license plates on it.
Surveillance video showed Casey leaving in a Cadillac, the authorities using that car to track the pair to a local hotel parking lot. And once they left, eventually the car chase that led to their capture. Casey was already facing capital murder charges for the 2015 death of Connie Ridgway. Her son Austin relieved the manhunt is finally over.
It's just night and day difference. It's like you're going through the darkest night, and then the next day the sun is shining.
Officials now vowing Casey will be brought to justice.
He will stay in handcuffs and shackles while he's in that cell. And if he wants to sue me for violating his civil rights, so be it. He's not getting out of this jail again.
If Casey White waives his extradition, it's possible he could be back in Florence, Alabama later today. Now, they may have spent this duo 6 days in Evansville, Indiana. Authorities say it's possible with the plan, according to the Marshal Service, of staying there for weeks in that one hotel. Sam Brock, NBC News. Vicki and Savannah, back to you.
Sam Brock, thank you.
For more on this story, we want to bring in Lauderdale County, Alabama Sheriff Rick Singleton. A reminder, Vicki White was the assistant director of the Lauderdale County Jail. Good morning, and thank you so much for being with us, Sheriff. First, I want to start with what we've heard from you about this person, that he is not getting out of this jail again. That's what you said. I mean, this is a man scheduled to face capital murder charges next month in the stabbing death of a woman. He was already in prison for this attempted murder and burglary charge, and now he escaped prison. What happens next for him, and how does what's just unfolded factor in?
Well, he will be extradited back to Alabama. If he waives extradition, that will then expedite the process, hopefully as early as even today. If he fights extradition, then it's going to be drawn out for several days, maybe even a few weeks. But he'll be brought back here to the Lauderdale County Courthouse, where he'll be immediately arraigned on the escape charges. He has to have an appearance before the judge within 72 hours. As soon as that arraignment is over, he will be immediately transported back to the Alabama Department of Corrections for incarceration.
I also want to get your reaction, of course, to the death of Vicki White, part of this tragedy here. According to the U.S. Marshals, when Casey got out of the car, he said, "Please help my wife. She just shot herself in the head, and I didn't do it." First, is there any reason to believe they got married while on the run? And second, is the prevailing theory here from law enforcement that she did, in fact, take her own life?
I mean, there's a possibility they got married. I don't know that they did, and he may consider her his wife. But and I'm sorry, I didn't remember the second part of the question.
Oh, no, that's right. I just asked, is the prevailing theory here that she did take her own life?
Yes, that's what I've heard and been informed of by the Marshals Task Force, that she did inflict the wound and that ended her life. The employees at the jail, it's a small facility. We have about 48 employees, but as assistant director, she knew each and every one of them. A lot of the younger corrections deputies looked at her as a mother figure. So it's just a bag of mixed emotions that we're going through and have been going through for the last several days. Even though she has done what she's done, the employees are still taking this very hard.
I bet. That's exactly what I want to ask you about now. I mean, I know she was a decorated corrections officer, years of experience, years of service. How well did you know her, and what do we know at this point about her motivation and the relationship with Casey White?
I've known Vicki since I've been in office, which is going on 8 years. We obviously were co-workers, and I had a lot of confidence in her, a lot of trust in her. Up until this happened, her record was unblemished. What in the world prompted her to do something like this? I'm at a loss. You know, I just obviously the relationship, you know, and it's not uncommon for inmates to try to persuade corrections deputies, especially of the opposite sex, to, you know, woo them, if you would. And apparently she fell for it.
We've also all seen, of course, that video of Vicky leading Casey White out of the jail. We know that she had said that she was taking him for this evaluation and then herself going to a medical appointment, both things which we now know were not true. But how exactly was she allowed to transport a prisoner facing these counts of capital murder by herself? I mean, I understand that she was a 17-year veteran, Employee of the Year 4 times, but given that the protocol was that they can't transport someone alone, an officer cannot do this by themselves. I mean, what's your take on how this happens and what changes are made, if any, to sort of make sure something like this doesn't happen again in terms of security procedures at the jail?
Well, you know, obviously this was well orchestrated. And that Friday morning, just prior to Vicky White leaving the facility with Casey White, she, as Assistant Director of Operations, was in charge of arranging transports. Friday morning is a busy court morning here in our courthouse. We had 2 vans of inmates leave just minutes before Vicky White took Casey White out of the jail. The first van was 2 deputies with 5 inmates. The second van, 2 deputies, 7 inmates. So all the transport deputies were, in fact, tied up. And she used her position, and I think she coordinated the transports to ensure that there were no transport deputies there. And took advantage of her position and told the booking officer that she was going to carry him up there and drop him off to the other deputies. And you know, I don't, the booking officer obviously didn't question it. I mean, she is the boss, you know, and she's in charge of transport. So I think that's pretty much was fit right into her plan. I think all that was planned ahead of time.
Sheriff Rick Singleton, we so much appreciate your time this morning. I know this has been quite a long week or so here, and we are sorry for the way that it's unfolded, but we appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
Today, President Biden is expected to unveil a plan that could have a major impact on your wallet. It takes aim at the country's record inflation, and its goal is to lower costs. NBC News White House correspondent Carol Lee joins us now with what we're learning about the plan. Good morning, Carol. What can we expect to hear from the president? And when could Americans actually start to see some relief?
Well, that's the big question here, because a lot of what the president is going to outline are things that he's already done through executive authority or things that he wants to do. And to that end, a lot of this depends on Congress. And President Biden's going to talk about some of the things that he would like Congress to do in terms of health care, in terms of prescription drugs, child care, and things like that. But there's not a clear path for getting those things done. One thing that Democrats have said they would try to do is pass a so-called reconciliation bill, which is just a fancy way of saying that they would put everything that they can get passed just among Democrats into one piece of legislation. But again, there's not even agreement within the party on exactly what the way forward there will be. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki talked about this a little bit yesterday. Take a listen.
Obviously, moving forward with a reconciliation package that would lower costs on American people, on elder care, on health care, on child care, would be a step that would help address how inflation is impacting people across this country. So we're having a range of conversations. A lot of Democrats are having a range of conversations with each other. I'm just not going to detail them more from here.
So the reality is that they don't know what they're going to actually get, but this is a huge political problem for the president. And so that's why you're seeing him come out today and talk about things he has done already and things he would like to get done. It's just not clear when that would happen.
Carol, during the president's announcement, he's expected to target the plan from Republican lawmakers, one that the White House has called, quote, ultra MAGA. What are you learning about that plan?
Well, this is a plan by the Senate, the chairman of this Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, Rick Scott of Florida, and it's his economic plan. President Biden has taken aim at this plan. It's an 11-point tax plan. The president argues that this is something that would raise taxes on middle-income Americans. Republicans obviously pushed back on that. Senator Scott saying that's not true. But this is part of the president's midterm elections message, where he's trying to set up this contrast, where he's arguing that Republicans would raise taxes on average Americans, whereas Democrats would raise taxes on corporations and and wealthy Americans. So it's really just a political argument designed to draw a contrast between the two parties ahead of the midterm elections.
Carol, inflation is at its highest point in more than 40 years. Tomorrow, the government is expected to release April's Consumer Price Index, the CPI. That'll give us an idea if inflation is at its peak or if it's still on the rise. Aside from hiking interest rates, what do we know about how the White House is trying to tamp down inflation?
Well, what the White House is trying to do, and the president will outline today in his event, which is designed to counter that information, that report that's about to come out. It's really designed to address that, to show that the president is doing something, because I don't think there's a lot of expectation that that's going to be particularly good for the president. And inflation is his biggest political drawback right now. It's the biggest challenge. So what we're going to hear from the president is he's focused on energy prices, things that he's done. You'll hear him talk about the strategic petroleum release that the U.S. government initiated recently. And then you'll hear him talk about things like prescription drugs or fixing something in the Affordable Care Act that allows for more affordable health care for more Americans. Again, a lot of things that have already been done. And then he'll talk about some things that he would like Congress to do.
All right, Carol, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Let's now get a check on your morning news now weather.
Michelle Grossman is here live with us in studio. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning to both of you. Love seeing both of you.
I know,
yes,
it's so
likewise.
Good every time still to have you in here.
I know, we're still kidding.
Still novel.
Yes. Yeah. But we're talking about a lot of heat out there because we are looking at record heat stretching from the southern plains all the way to the Midwest. Lots of 90s. It is so hot. The air conditioners, the fans, they are cranking today. And we probably will break some records today, especially in Kansas City. Your forecasted high is 93 degrees, a record of 92. St. Louis, 92. That's where you'll be today. And Memphis, 91. We could see some spots over 100 degrees once again. This is the fourth day in a row. We're going to continue to see this heat as we go through the later part of this week. So by tomorrow, you see this heat kind of expands to the Ohio Valley. So now we're talking about New Mexico all the way to Ohio, Toledo, Ohio, 87 degrees. The record is 89. So you may or may not break that record, but we're going to follow that for you. Omaha, 94. Denver, 88. El Paso, 98 degrees. Now, we're not going to be quite as hot, but still staying really warm as we head throughout the end of the week into the weekend. So we're looking at Kansas City on Thursday, 91. By the weekend, we're getting closer to the 80s. So still really warm for this time of year. And temperatures are 25 degrees above what is typical for this time of year in some spots. This warmth is going to aid in fire spread, fire danger once again. 13 million people impacted by a red flag warning. That is in the pink there. So it's super dry. We have really low humidity, and the winds are going to help in that too. Your fire outlook for today, where you see the red, that includes Albuquerque. That's where we had the potential for rapid fire spread, and we already have a lot of fires burning. So any winds are going to kind of fan those flames. Severe threat also in the Great Lakes. We have the risk for winds gusting to 60 miles per hour, some hail, and also the chance of some tornadoes. So we're busy once again today.
Busy, and again, that fire season starting early.
I know.
Lots to be concerned about there.
Yeah.
Michelle, thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. Great to have you with us in a little bit. And coming up on Morning News Now, the polls are open in two GOP stronghold states. We'll break down the high-stakes primary races going on today in Nebraska and West Virginia.
And in Pennsylvania, union workers speak out ahead of their state's primary. More on the issues that could influence their votes coming up after the break.
Welcome back. It's primary election day for voters in the red states of West Virginia and Nebraska. Both states' contests involve fierce Republican battles and Trump-backed candidates. In West Virginia, two incumbent candidates are battling for a newly drawn congressional district. And in Nebraska, three candidates are vying for the governor's seat, with one facing allegations of sexual harassment. NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray joins us now for more on these upcoming elections. Mark, good morning. I know you are a busy guy these days, so we appreciate your time this morning. Let's start in West Virginia. President Trump has already endorsed candidate Alex Mooney, who's running against David McKinley. How much influence will Trump have on this election? What have we been seeing play out so far? And will the results help us predict here whether other Trump-endorsed candidates will be successful?
Well, Savannah, just last week we ended up seeing former President Donald Trump carry J.D. Vance across the finish line in that Republican primary in Ohio. And the former president is trying to do the same thing in West Virginia and Nebraska. And as you mentioned, in West Virginia, this is a member-on-member Republican race due to redistricting. The state of West Virginia ended up losing one congressional district, which made these two Republican members face off against each other. The former President Donald Trump has endorsed Alex Mooney over David McKinley. McKinley ended up voting for the bipartisan infrastructure bill, as well as voting for an independent January 6th commission. The former president has criticized McKinley for that. McKinley, on the other hand, has endorsements from Joe Manchin and the state's Republican governor.
Let's now talk Nebraska, where voters are also facing a tough choice. So Charles Herbster gained Trump's endorsement. He's also been accused of groping multiple women. He's denied those allegations. Can Trump's endorsement overshadow those allegations? I mean, when you take what you just said about J.D. Vance in Ohio, how do other opponents in this race compare at this point?
Yeah, I hate to sound like a broken record again, but we're going to see what the results are. This, by all indications, is a really competitive three-way contest right now. As you mentioned, the former President Donald Trump has endorsed Charles Herbster, a businessman who has been accused of multiple groping allegations, of which he is denied. And, you know, when you end up looking at Donald Trump's imprint on the Republican Party, I think if Herbster ends up winning this, you'll end up seeing Republicans say that this has really shown that this is the party of Donald Trump, that these types of candidates facing these types of allegations continue to win contests. But again, this is a really, really close race, and we're going to have to wait for the results tonight.
Absolutely. Finally, Mark, I want to look ahead. Pennsylvania has its primary coming up next week. A little bit more of an interesting state here, given its purple status, but the future of abortion has become one of the top campaign issues. Leading Republican candidates say they will further restrict abortion in the state. But how is that landing with voters, especially in a state where elections often come down here? Is the GOP at risk of losing its base in the state, or is this landing well?
Yeah, and so again, this abortion is going to be more of a general election issue than a primary issue. And Savannah, what I'm looking at is the governor's race. And so far on the Senate contest, where Republicans, Mehmet Oz and David McCormick, have sucked up a lot of the oxygen. On the Democratic side, you have John Fetterman running against Conor Lamb. But when we talk about abortion and abortion policy, it's the governor's race. You'd have Democrat Josh Shapiro, who's running unopposed in the Democratic primary. But we're seeing a huge Republican field right now. Most of the field is against abortion rights, and we'll have to see how the votes come out next week.
All right, Mark, thank you so much. Again, we appreciate your time.
Well, let's stay on the Pennsylvania primary now and hear from union workers who came together last night for a town hall to discuss some of the biggest issues facing working Americans. NBC News Washington correspondent Yamiche Alcindor joins us now from just outside of Pittsburgh with more on this. Yamiche, good morning. You were there at the town hall last night. Give us a little background here. Why did these workers decide to come together, and what is it that they want?
Well, good morning. I sat in on a town hall with the United Steelworkers, and this is, of course, a large union dedicated to really advocating for the rights of steelworkers. And they are laser focused on workers' rights issues, laser focused on retirements and pension plans. They told me that that is top of mind. So listen to a little bit about what the union workers said to me when I asked them about what they were thinking about this primary election season.
I know that healthcare workers agree with me that health and safety is a #1 issue. Staffing is a #1 issue. We are in a staffing crisis.
So it's not just about, labor issues. They also are concerned about women's rights. They're also concerned about education. In some parts of the state, gun rights are a big issue.
3 Gs are tough.
3 Gs?
Guns, God, and gynecology, Those are the things, and that's what seems to get through the most to people.
It is incredibly striking, of course, when you hear that last soundbite, guns, God, and gynecology, talking about abortion rights and connecting that, of course, with workers' rights. I should tell you, sitting in that meeting, one thing that I was struck by as they were talking about the Supreme Court, they were talking about hinting at the Supreme Court decision on abortion, the poised Supreme Court decision on abortion. They also said they're worried that the Supreme Court to take away workers' rights and the ability of them to organize. So as this Supreme Court decision is a talk of the town across the nation, union workers are also looking at it and saying, well, what other precedents might be overturned in the years to come?
Yamiche, as you know, Pennsylvania is a battleground state. Both parties trying to get the upper hand there with voters. What was your sense when it comes to the union members that you spoke with? Is it a politically diverse group? And yeah, the 3 Gs, that was one way to put it that I've never heard before.
I certainly have never heard that before, but I should tell you that when I talked to them, I got the sense that these workers, and most of them were union leaders, they were really focused on making sure that workers' rights and labor rights were top of mind. The real differing opinions come in on what party and what candidates are best for those issues. Listen to a little bit about what these workers had to say about the sort of arguments that you're hearing on the shop floor, but also the sort of differing cultural issues that are on people's minds.
We represent folks that live in red towns and blue towns. And so it's not about getting the right, party in office, because you may be in a red town that in D.C. doesn't agree with our position.
There's been a lot of divisiveness since the last president has left office. And it seems like, you're either on this side or this side, and it's trying to get them to come together, to work on the issues, not the parties.
And part of that town hall, they were talking about those sort of differing issues there. And part of that town hall, there was a leader of the union who was talking about the infrastructure plan and talking about whether or not President Biden was really delivering jobs. He was making the case that, yes, that these issues, this union was going to benefit from the jobs that were coming from roads and bridges and building them and repairing them. But I should tell you, I was listening in the back and someone said those jobs are not coming, that there are no jobs being created. So you could hear, even in that room, the tension that's happening there. I should also tell you, there was this being handed out. It really is a list of candidates and checks going next to the Democrats who are saying, hey, here are the issues that we care about. They really are backing that. And then around the Republicans, they had X's. So while they were not trying to sort of focus on one political party, it was very clear that they were saying the Democratic Party has backed their issues in a more wholesome way.
Well, they tend to be the union-favored party. Yamiche Alcindor outside of Pittsburgh there for us. Thank you so much.
Let's get to some international headlines now. Police have identified those 3 Americans found dead at a Bahamas resort last week.
Yeah, Janice Mackey-Frayer has that and more. Good morning, Janice.
Good morning. What a tragedy and what a mystery in the Bahamas. A Tennessee couple and a Florida man have been officially identified, but how they died at a resort is still very unclear. Michael Phillips, his wife Robbie Phillips, Vincent Paul Chiarelli were all guests at the Sandals Emerald Bay Resort. Chiarelli's wife, Donis, is still in serious condition in hospital. Now, police say that foul play is not suspected and toxicology reports are still pending. In a statement, Sandals Resort said that they are working to support the investigation as well as the guests' families in, quote, every possible way. In the Philippines, the son of former dictator, the late Ferdinand Marcos, has emerged as the winner in presidential elections. Ferdinand Marcos Jr., known as Bong Bong, won by a landslide. His running mate is Sara Duterte, the daughter of the outgoing leader. Now, the victory of scions of authoritarian leaders has human rights advocates in the Philippines worried, and it's also a very startling reversal of the popular revolt that ousted Marcos's father 30 years ago. And finally, an Israeli street musician will be on stage with Maroon 5 when the band performs in Tel Aviv tonight. Talk about a dream. Adam Levine spotted the busker, 27-year-old Coral Bismuth, when she was playing for a crowd of beachgoers. He liked what he heard. He put it on his Instagram, 14.2 million followers. And they did a deal. I mean, it isn't clear if she's going to open for Maroon 5 or if she's going to join one of their songs, but what a dream come true for this performer. The band is playing 2 sold-out shows in Tel Aviv to cap off a Middle East tour.
Wow.
And that's a look at your headline.
Can you imagine that? You're just there doing
so
your
cool.
thing, and then Adam Levine puts you on his Insta, and suddenly you're on stage with Maroon 5.
Can you imagine even just that he was there listening?
Right,
within
exactly.
the city, and now all of a sudden she gets to be on stage. Very, very cool. Janice, thanks.
We appreciate it. Well, coming up, a troubling trend, new COVID cases and hospitalizations on the rise in nearly every state. What you need to know to stay safe.
Plus, more workers ditching the 9 to 5 and setting their own schedules, but that doesn't mean they're happy. We will explain that next in our weekly check-in here on Morning News Now.
We're back now with the latest on the coronavirus. Cases are rising in 48 states as the summer travel season gets underway. Hospitalizations also trending up across the country, but deaths have remained flat even in the face of these new infections.
We also know now that the Biden administration is planning to prioritize vaccines for high-risk Americans only this fall because of new challenges with COVID funding. Dr. Bob Lahita joins us now for more on this. Dr. Lahita is the director of the Institute for Autoimmune and Rheumatic Diseases at St. Joseph Health, also a professor of medicine at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine, and a clinical professor of medicine at Rutgers. Doctor, I feel like all of our viewers could probably recite all of those titles because we love when you join us, and we all know you well. Thanks for being here. So we always love your context and perspective, so help us put this one in context because we're clearly seeing this new rise in cases in the numbers. Also, a lot of us have probably either got it again, know somebody who has. I mean, it clearly seems like it's very much so going around again. But then we have this good news that deaths are still low. So what do you make of this? What's your concern level, especially as we head into the summer?
Well, the concern level, Savannah, is very, very clear that the numbers are rising. There is no question that is being seen around the world, but particularly here, as you mentioned, most of the states are seeing major rises. The good news is the severity of this variant, these variants, the BA4 and BA5, is not bad. But the transmissibility that is being infected is very, very high. So just about everybody's going to be infected at some time or another.
Well, Doctor, we are hearing that the Biden administration will have to prioritize new vaccines for high-risk Americans this fall, given the lack of funding for new COVID cases. So we know vaccines help. That's probably what's keeping the death rates low. Are you worried about this lack of funding and what it's going to do to our ability to fight the virus as a nation?
Yes, Vicki. Well, you know, they asked for, the government or the White House asked for $22.5 billion. Congress knocked it down to $15.6 billion, which means that providers, those are doctors, nurses, vaccination centers, healthcare centers, places that give the vaccines for free and drugs for free and monoclonal antibodies for free, are not going to be reimbursed. So it leaves our most vulnerable segment of the population at great risk. And that is my concern going forward.
Doctor, let's look globally, of course, something that's so important in this virus, especially as vaccines are or are not distributed in certain places. I first want to get your take on what's happening with COVID in South Africa. The virus is spreading as fast as it really ever has. The government has said that they could be in the middle of a fifth wave of COVID. What do you make of that? And is this something other countries should expect to happen? Or are we kind of in the middle of our own? What do you think here?
I think we're in the middle of our own. I looked at the South African data, and it doesn't appear that there are any new, very, very serious variants developing. However, there has been an 18.7% increase in infections in South Africa. They had 3,237 new cases yesterday. So that is pretty interesting, and it bodes all of us to watch to see if, God forbid, there's a new, very infective and very clinically serious variant developing.
Right, the specific thing to watch out for there. Dr. Bob Lahita, thank you so much, as always. We love to see you. Now, in this week's mental health check-in, we're focusing on the impact of the COVID pandemic on college students.
Yeah, plus how to use social media without risking a blow to your self-esteem. Plus, hybrid schedules, they may not be making us happier. As always, we want to get a moment here to take a pause and take a deep breath and reflect on our emotional well-being. Is that enough of a moment?
Yeah.
I never feel like it's long enough, Savannah. We need like 20 more minutes.
I know.
All right, board-certified psychiatrist Dr. Sue Varma joins us now for more on these headlines. Hey, Dr. Varma, always great to see you. A new study out of Dartmouth University showed students with high concerns about COVID struggled more with depression and anxiety than the classmates who were less concerned about the virus. Many were worried about getting off campus, isolation in the dorms, returning to campus during the pandemic. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? When you are more worried about something, you're more likely to be anxious and stressed about it. So what is the best way for college students to sort of decompress, deal with their worries, and get back to a healthy headspace?
Yes. So one thing that the study revealed is that folks who had anxiety and depression prior to the pandemic were more at risk for developing it after. So I would say that, look, if you have a history of anxiety and depression and you happen to be in treatment, please continue it. And if you have not been in treatment, just start it. And psychotherapy, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy, can be very effective. So if you can get even a few sessions at the college counseling center, and oftentimes they will then refer you to people in the community, it can be really helpful. Maintaining structure around sleep and wake time is huge, because we saw in this study that a lot of college students were either sleeping a lot less or they were sleeping a lot more due to the stress, and they were spending a lot of time on their phones. So if they can cut out the social media, limit it, and have more in real life connections. And of course, psychotherapy and medication, if needed, can go a long way.
Good advice. Yeah, and it leads very well into my next question for you, which is about social media. And there's this new initiative, it seems cool, called Detox Your Feed, where it urges people to block or mute accounts that may have a negative impact. And according to a survey by Dove, the brand a lot of us probably know, nearly 50% of girls who interact with beauty advice posts specifically feel lower self-esteem. Why is that? And can you explain some of that, peel that back a little bit? What exactly does that mean? Beauty advice post, why does it have an impact on self-esteem, And is there content out there that can do the opposite, boost self-esteem?
Yes. So, there's a very fine line between content that inspires us and educates us. So there might be beauty or fashion content that we find interesting and really pulls us in. And look, the visuals, when we're talking about Instagram or some of these photo posts, can be very compelling, right? Because there's this aspirational quality as well, that like, this is what I want to look like, this is what I want to be, and these are how I want to get makeup tutorials, and this is how I can get them. And these are the products that our favorite celebrities or Instagram influencers are using. The downside is that when we feel that there's a gap between what society expects of us, what we think we need to look like or should look like, and what we think we actually look like, that gap creates a lot of stress and anxiety and tension. And then it makes people want to chase, for example, cosmetic procedures, which is a whole other story. So if you're finding that after a few minutes, instead of getting educated, like I love the fact that if somebody's like, hey, now I know where to buy this and I can actually afford it, that's one thing. But if you find that your mood is lower, then I would say hit either the unfollow button or hit the mute button, which allows you to stay connected to that person, but that they're not in your news feed. So when it comes to social media, being very intentional and deliberate about who you're choosing to look at and how much time you're choosing to spend, and having those trackers on your phone tells you, hey, I spent a lot of time on this day. My mood is lower.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, by the way, are easy settings that you can just mute somebody, the little ... It's pretty easy to find.
Exactly, up in that little right corner. Finally, Dr. Sue Varma, very quickly, talk to us about this idea. People are choosing more flexible work schedules, but new research shows they're actually not happier. What gives?
Yeah, really.
Yeah, so it's so interesting, because when our friends are actually working and when we're not, or when we're working and they're not, especially on the weekends, our mood will be lower, because we'll be looking at the social media feeds, again, social media, and talking about all the interesting things they're doing and that we're not privy to. So this can be changed if we are reminded that we are part of a larger team. I think that's really important for people to have a weekend team or the night shift. So we feel like we're part of something, and for us to stay connected to other people who are also working these off hours, so to speak. And also if we're able to remind ourselves that maybe we are getting some of the benefits by working on the weekend, so that we can catch up with life stuff during the weekdays.
Dr. Sue Varma, always coming with the strong advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And coming up, serious allegations against the Black Lives Matter Foundation about how donations are being spent.
I felt like it was a slap in the face, because again, they've been out here suffering.
Up next, what an investigation revealed about a $6 million purchase under the group's name. That's next on Morning News Now.
Welcome back. Donors to the Black Lives Matter Foundation are questioning how their money is being spent after an investigation revealed a $6 million home purchased under the group's name. Now, the group's former director is denying any mishandling of donations. NBC News Now correspondent Priscilla Thompson has this for us.
News of a $6 million home purchase in the name of the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation is fueling questions about the group's use of donated funds.
It's been a really bizarre experience to know the truth and to have false and misinformation be spread about me.
Now, a former leader at the center of the controversy speaking out as criticism and calls for more transparency grow.
The idea that Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation received millions of dollars and then I hid those dollars in my bank account is absolutely false.
Former executive director of the foundation, Patrisse Cullors, defending the home purchase in a wide-ranging interview with the Associated Press.
We found this really amazing space that has office spaces, that has parking, that has, yes, a home on the property, but also has a sound stage where you could do podcasts and you could do live events in the backyard.
On Instagram, Cullors said the property purchase wasn't announced because it needed repairs and renovations, and that the house was intended as a safe space for Black people in the community. At that time, she denied ever living in the property or using it for personal gain. But now, Cullors is telling the AP she did use the home at least twice for personal use, including for an inauguration celebration and a birthday party for her son. Decisions that Cullors says she regrets, telling the AP, "I look back at that and think that probably wasn't the best idea." NBC News reached out to Cullors and the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, but has not heard back. She left the organization in May of last year. The interview comes little over a month after New York Magazine detailed how the foundation secretly paid cash for a lavish $6 million Los Angeles house with 6 bedrooms and bathrooms, plus a pool.
The nature of the purchase of the home had not been disclosed widely, and the people who knew of it were not letting it be known more widely, even within the organization and the movement more broadly.
The article prompting a flood of support and criticism from some allies of BLM, along with a demand for answers about how the $90 million donated to the Black Lives Matter Foundation in 2020 after the murder of George Floyd were being spent.
The people who I speak with in the activist communities, a lot of them were upset to learn of the home's purchase. They felt like it was a slap in the face because, again, they've been out here suffering.
The criticism, Cullors says, is par for the course.
We're eradicating white supremacy and we're getting millions of dollars to do it. And of course we're going to get attacked. That's what happens.
People should be doing their homework on where they're donating their money, not just following a name.
Our thanks to Priscilla Thompson for that report. Now, the Associated Press also spoke with a board member who says the organization has undergone an independent financial audit and plans to release its latest IRS disclosure forms later this month.
That was a big bombshell.
Yeah,
all right, well, Wall Street is expected to rally after yesterday's sell-off, which was sparked by continued worries about inflation, rising interest rates, and a slowing global economy.
Yeah, lots to cover here. And CNBC's Silvana Henao is with us for that. Hey, Silvana.
Hey guys, good morning. Yeah, so Wall Street is looking to rebound after that big sell-off yesterday, which was fueled by continued concerns about inflation. The S&P 500 closing below the 4,000 level for the first time in more than a year, and the Nasdaq is now down more than 27% from its record high. Here's a staggering stat. The world's largest tech companies, Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, Amazon, Alphabet, Nvidia, and Facebook's parent Meta, have shed more than $1 trillion in market cap in just the last 3 trading days. Wall Street's pre-market positivity not extending to Asia overnight, but Europe is in the green. AMC's revenue surged in the first quarter of the year as moviegoers continue to return to theaters amid the pandemic. The company says the results were the strongest in 2 years and were boosted by highly anticipated movies such as Spider-Man: No Way Home and The Batman. The outlook for the rest of the year could be bright with Doctor Strange in theaters right now and potential blockbusters like Top Gun: Maverick and Lightyear on the way. Match, the parent company of Tinder and other dating apps, is suing Google over its billing policies on the Play Store. Match claims Google is illegally dominating the market for distributing apps on Android devices by forcing developers to use Google's billing system and then taking a cut of the payments of up to 30%. Google had allowed Match and others to use alternative payments, but last year said it would start requiring them to use its own system. Back to you.
Stuff, yeah. I want to back up, Silvana, to that AMC story. Are you going back to the movies? Are you going back to the movies in person?
I have once.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
What did you see?
I went to see Encanto.
Oh, look at you. We don't talk about Bruno.
Exactly.
Right, what did you see?
Thank you. So, I can't even remember.
What?
No, it was the
not the Batman or Spider-Man.
It was Batman.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Okay,
Nice.
good job, Savannah.
No, I was actually more so taken by the experience of being back there. I went to one of those nice theaters where they serve you, so that was kind of like
that's
my
the one I went to
takeaway.
as well.
Yeah. All right, Silvana, thank you. And coming up on Morning News Now, changing the game.
This is absolutely an incredible opportunity, but it's one that I never anticipated.
When we come back, we will introduce you to one woman making history on the baseball field. Well, I love that the Good Talker is back, and this one will have you talking. A famous portrait of Marilyn Monroe by Andy Warhol has just broken 2 art records after being sold at auction. The portrait, called Shot Sage Blue Marilyn, sold for $195 million. That makes it the most expensive piece of American art and the most expensive piece of the 20th century art that has ever sold. The painting is actually based on a promotional photo of the actress from the 1953 film Niagara. The title was based on an incident where a woman shot at a stack of 4 Monroe portraits that were in Warhol's studio with a pistol, but this particular painting was not struck by a bullet.
Wow.
Savannah?
Oh my gosh, so much cool stuff going on there. Very neat. Thanks, Vicki. Now, for the story of a mom who is celebrating her daughter making history as one of only a handful of women to hold a position in both minor and Major League Baseball. NBC News Now top story anchor Tom Yamas heard what it meant to her to put on the uniform.
This Mother's Day, Chicago resident Joan Krall has a lot to be proud of.
I couldn't even believe that I was seeing the last name Krall, K-R-A-L-L, on my 5'4" daughter who has gorgeous long fingernails. I'm thrilled for her.
Joan spent Mother's Day at the ballpark with her twin daughters, Katie and Annie. She's one of the first mothers who can cheer on her daughter in a professional baseball uniform. Joan and her daughter Katie throwing out the first pitch at a minor league game in Portland, Maine this weekend.
Now we give it up for Joan!
The reality of being able to throw out a first pitch is a miracle that my daughter's on the field.
This season, the Boston Red Sox hired Katie as a development coach for their Double-A affiliate, the Portland Sea Dogs. It's the first time she's worn a baseball uniform since Little League. Working in this sport at a professional level is a lifelong dream.
This is absolutely an incredible opportunity, but it's one that I never anticipated because when I was growing up, you didn't see any female coaches.
And as recently as 2018, the year Katie graduated from Northwestern, there were no women in coaching roles in both the major and minor leagues.
I think if you had told me at Northwestern, I would have said there's a better chance of me being a mascot than there is of me being a coach some days.
But that's changed in the last few years. Katie is one of 11 women coaching major and minor league baseball this season, joining women like Alyssa Nacken, who coached first base for the Giants last month, and Rachel Balkovic, who was recently promoted by the Yankees from hitting coach to manager of the minor league Tampa Tarpons.
Comes from the top down, both at teams and the league office, of recognizing the value that women bring and saying, you know, we want the best.
Katie hopes her story inspires the next generation.
I hope that now little girls are seeing that actually, if you want to be in uniform, if you want to be in pants on the field, there's a place for you.
A mission that makes her mother extra proud this Mother's Day.
And Katie has, the world is her oyster, and being in Maine, that's an appropriate analogy.
I want them to believe that whatever they set their mind to, it's possible, and that if they're tenacious and they believe in themselves, they can accomplish extraordinary things.
Certainly true. Thank you so much to Tom Yamas for that report. Great story.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.